Donny, what an absolute pleasure and honour it is to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So the lockdown, to be honest, couldn't really come at a worse time for you, because you finished your album, been slaving over for 3 or 4 months, meant to be touring, and then the lockdown comes. Every other musician's thinking it's fantastic that they can get down to some good writing time, but you probably can't bear to look at another piece of music production software for another year or so.
Pretty much, you've nailed on the head. It is like it's not ideal, but we had so much momentum that we're building over the last 2 or 3 years with all the touring and stuff, and to kind of hang back and not release it would have killed that momentum. And I think, funnily enough, it's a good thing. It's frustrating because I can't reach it, but I've actually built my audience over the last 3-4 months, which is great. And I think if you held out to put music out, I think you kind of up shit creek, because I think things it's going to drag out a lot longer than everyone expected.
Because everyone's in lockdown, everyone's really keen for new music and something to listen to. So if you release an album, you've got a captive audience of people who aren't going to be doing much.
That's right. I mean, that was the thing. And if and when you can tour and do shows again, it's going to be so competitive. So I think, and you know, it just felt right. Like I'd worked up to this point, I'd gotten done. I mean, when you're satisfied with the album and you put it out, like that's the best thing to do, is just let it out there and let it do its thing. And I was really happy how it turned out, and the reactions have been fantastic for it. So it's like you know, you've got no choice, and I think it's definitely been the right decision.
Going back into your history, for those who have the embarrassment of not knowing much about you, can you tell them a bit about your background and your music career so far?
Yeah, so years and years ago, in about 2009-10, this thing called, you'll be too young, you look too young, when MySpace came out.
Oh, I had MySpace. I was only 7 or 8, but I wasn't big into it, but I had a MySpace.
Yeah. So anyone my age, I'm 39 this year, so I grew up when I was about 13, the internet came out. So anything online back then was kind of like fart jokes or pornography. So we always took, and also coming before that, you'd go and play like arcade games, and you'd have three letters to put your high score name in. So arse, or, you know. And so that's the kind of approach we took with the internet. And so I started doing some music. I was in this really great jazz improv band called Triosk, and we played around the world. We did two European tours, and it was fantastic. And the band broke up, so then I kept that project going. It was like solo bass. I was doing we were playing to loops, so I was doing lots of electric bass and making loops, and I was playing double bass. And so I had this idea to continue on from that and make this kind of like solo bass art project thing. And it ended up being Donny Benét. I ended up singing.
So that's where Donny Benét began.
It's a beautiful accident. But on my MySpace, I kind of put on that. I was a freelance bass player for years, and I was pretty high in the jazz world. And when you're doing that, you also do a lot of other things. You play hotel lobbies, very wealthy people's parties, things like that. So I'll put this backstory down of Donny Benét was this guy whose father was this famous Italian accordion player. And I just left it there because that's what everyone on their MySpace did, that kind of shit. Like, you know,
yeah.
And it kind of stuck. So I got caught with this, but I've only kind of come clear about the last few years because I'm like, look, I can't do this anymore. But a lot of the experiences were very much mirrored in my upbringing. Like, I spent years playing to no audiences and honing, I guess, essentially all the skills that ended up being Donny Benét. So when it came the time, and when I wrote these, I think of Donny as a beautiful accident. And so by the time I came to writing and getting ready to perform these songs live, I'd been doing it for years. The idea of Donny was like this kind of fat, balding Australian guy, you know, singing about with my Italian background kind of. trying to be like a black R&B singer from the 80s with, Marcus, funk bass player style. And it turned into this thing, and it was just like always music I always wanted to do when I was like a teenager and a kid. And it ended up being this. So, I mean,
almost the antithesis of what was popular at the time, of loads of pretty indie bands being on the stage, and there's you stood up there with a bass giving it hell.
That's right. I think the first band was this band called Sonora from LA, and they came over, and they were like this kind of guitar shoegaze, American indie kind of thing. And I opened for them, and it was my first show I'd ever done. And I got off stage, and they're like, "Dude, what is?" They were amazed, and it was just so like at that time there was really really nice pretty guys singing their hearts out.
There comes a time where sleep is the new sex.
The early Donny gigs were amazing because people would be there and they'd be like, "What the fuck is happening?"
Taken aback.
Yeah, like what is this? And then they'd by the end of it they'd love it, and it was always really funny to watch the reactions and watch people. You have to win over people throughout the night. So it's definitely been it was definitely a very odd thing to do. It was probably the most avant-garde thing I could have done, even coming from a jazz background.
Is that where the rumour comes from? Because I heard a rumour that you went to Las Vegas to play Tom Jones covers. Was that real or just a myth?
Yeah. No, it's not real. No, I actually got in trouble when I was applying for a US visa. They're like, "So, when did you go to Las Vegas? Did you have a visa?" I was like, okay. And it was really funny because I think it was May. I did a support tour with Back to Marco, and I had to unfortunately come home. I landed and then found out I had to come back home. So I had to cut that trip very short. And then I went back in August, and that was at the tail end of a really long European tour. So I didn't really do America properly till February. And I was very amazed at how, not serious, but like sincere Americans were. And so the whole backstory, they were taking it verbatim, and I was like, "Oh wow!" And so I do a thing. I did that classic Australian thing of like, come down to my gig. We're gonna have to, I'd say something like really funny, and they'd be like, "Wow!" Like, okay,
that's so American.
I know. It really took me back. I was like, "Oh, I mean, you must get it." For the Americans to kind of interpret it that way was hilarious.
I just like second dinner.
So you say the character of Donny Benét was born out of a MySpace mistake, but has the character always kind of been there? Have you always been kind of a middle-aged Casanova?
Yeah. I grew up in a really not rural, but like very Australian area. So you'd get that kind of typical like Australian male where they go to football, go home, punch on sink piss, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it was the opposite I wanted to be of that, and so the opposite of that was my kind of Italian uncle. So that I guess cheeky kind of sense of humor that they always had is there as well. Like that's my but it's all done like it's very PG, very PG-13. It's just like as sleazy as I look, and it's terrible. If I take my son to the park, I'm like, "Oh man, am I going to get in trouble?" Looking like I do being at a park, I'm like, "Oh god." But no, it's fine.
Everyone's ushering their kids away.
No, usually now it's actually people can't. I went to the park the other day and these people were staring at me. I'm like, "Oh shit!" And they're like, "We really loves the D Zone." I was doing this Instagram live, and I was like, nice. "Oh, thanks." And like where I live is really like suburban and like, boring. I was like, "Thank you." so I think it's cool. I think it's fine.
each other in these unforgiving times. We carry on and live our lives without seeing those left behind. Reach out and touch someone who needs love when we find ourselves surrounded by uncertainty.
You've got a very strong aesthetic, and it's become kind of a calling card for Donny Benét. Have you had any fashion influences or idols over the years that you've based your looks on, or has it kind of just been your own kind of fashion style that you've turned up to the max?
No, that was I think it was like embracing the baldness and the hair.
Yeah.
Like a really hard thing when you start going bald, and I don't know what it was. I did my second film clip, Sophisticated Lover. The actor who was cast as my father had this Greek guy, and he had this big moustache, and it was like, I remember just saw him, I was like, oh fuck, I just shaved off the rest of my beard, made a moustache. And then I was watching a lot of Italo disco clips early on, and there was like a whole bunch of guys. There was this guy, there's a really great clip of him on this Italian show called Disco Ring, and he's just got this big kind of Italian moustache, and kind of that. There was also a movie when I was really young. I watched a lot of Bud Spencer and Terence Hill films, which are kind of like two like very classic Italian actors from the 70s. And watching all those films, like all the guys have got big fat moles, I'm like, it was a very influential.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought if I'm really up and sing, he's gonna look like this.
Yeah,
so,
he's got to look the part.
Yeah.
Speaking of Italo disco, on the album, especially on You Don't Need Love and One Night in Paradise, you kind of hear a bit of an Italo disco in there. And I've heard somewhere that your dad was on the Italo disco scene. Is that true?
That's part.
You're just full of lies.
Yeah. No, I wish it was, but those songs, they were kind of. The one in particular, I've got a really nice memory for One Night in Paradise. I was in Hamburg beginning of last year, and walking after the show, walking along the shoreline, and there was this kind of bar closing up. There was these two like very typical German guys that were smoking, and they were very cool. And they had this Laura Branigan track, Self-Control, playing, which is like a really iconic kind of big 80s hit in Europe. And it's got like it's got like a Lindrum DX7 bass, like very typical Italo sounds. But these guys are like, they're very German, and they're like just chilling out. It was like 1 a.m. and I was like, yeah, it's like, and it was coming, you could hear it it was on top of a hill, so it was like, had that nice, it was really quiet, it was really still, and you could just heard the song kind of echoing through the street. And I was like, it's a really, really good song. And I like the idea of, I never really set about writing a song to go, I want to write a song like this, but kind of halfway through writing One Night in Paradise, it started to remind me of that night. And I was like, oh, cool.
The theme for the album is one of a soundtrack to an 80s dinner party. That's quite an abstract concept, so where did that come from, and how did that influence the songs on the album?
So it was this weird thing, it's not weird at all actually. A friend of mine was, he was in an Australian touring band, and the touring manager or the guy's manager, sound guy, basically they knew me and said, oh, Donny Benét's like the Australian Robert Palmer, like, but not as handsome, but like, and I like that because I was a bit concerned about where this album should go after the Don, because the Don was like a guy in his early 30s, very brash, like this cynical songs about romance and Tinder and shit like that. And I'm like, what does Donny do? I'm nearly 40. How does he evolve? So The Robert Palmer kind of comment was a starting point to, I guess, thinking, well, that's like a guy that, you know, he's very confident, very stylish. Like, what was he? You know, he was in his 40s when he kind of really took off. And then I was going around that territory, just listening to stuff, and of course, once you do Robert Palmer, you go into Brian Ferry, and there's all the Roxy Music stuff, obviously, which is amazing. But like Avalon is like, you know. But then there's another album I found of Brian Ferry's called La Bête Noire, which is like 1987, and the songs in it are fantastic. He's got impeccable taste with the musicians he uses, and like the production, the musicianship, everything on it was amazing. But it was a really unpopular album, and it's the kind of album that like 40 people in their early to mid 40s would listen to kind of at a dinner party. Like, it's not, they weren't like dance bangers, and they weren't like,
it's not going to be in the charts, but you'll have it on in your house.
Not at all. Yeah, and I was like, and I was talking to this same friend who passed on the Robert Palmer comment. I said, that's not a bad thing. Like, if you write an album that, you know, people only play at dinner parties. He's like, man, if you like it, do it. And I became really attached to this album, so I was like, oh, my Mr. Experience is not necessarily falling into that category, but it was like, again, a security thing of like, well, if you write an album that you like, and it's, you know, it's kind of suitable for that listening setting, that's completely fine. So, yeah, that's where that came in.
Well, the album itself, I was following your progress on social media. It didn't seem to take you that long to put together. Was it fairly straightforward writing experience? I had you already put down some material before and then came back to it.
Yeah, so it was like initially 2018 I went to Europe and then realised very quickly that I needed to start writing another album. But then at the same time, the touring just exploded. So in 2018 I was in Europe three or four times. It was insane. And then 2019 I was in Europe again another three times, and the US twice. It was insane. So 2018 to kind of mid 2019 I wrote a whole bunch of things that I thought would be suitable for like European festivals, and they were all just shit. It was like and it's fine. It's part of like the writing process is to get all that crap out of the way. So the touring kind of started snowballing, and then I had very limited time. I'd kind of get home, I'd be home for maybe a month and a half, and then just get some momentum writing, and then have to stop and pick up and go again. And I'm not really great at writing on the road. A lot of the touring we're doing as well, like you're just traveling all the time, so you don't really have time to sit there and, you know, think. And then about August 2019, after I had a massive tour in Europe and a tour in America, and the mixing engineer I wanted to use was very, very, very popular, and we realized the only way we could fit in, the only time he had available was late November, and then we were looking at the timeline for the label and how we wanted to structure our tour, our 2020 touring, and we realized that I needed to have it ready by December 31. So I booked in my mixing with only 4 songs written. But I was confident because I'd written all this. I got all the stuff out of the way, and by the time I came back in August, I had a good 3 months. I could sit down and I had one Australian tour, which was fine, and I just basically wrote. At that point, I'd probably written 20 songs that were just rubbish. So then, the last 10 songs I wrote, 10, 15 songs, were just weirdly focused. It was very close. I think. About 2 weeks before I needed to start editing and re-recording vocals, I was still stuck 3 songs short.
Well, that's tight.
And then Negroni Summer was the song that unlocked everything. I'd had the instrumentals written for quite a while, and I really liked them. It kind of was like my Michael McDonald Steely Dan.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites off the album.
It's fun. I'm one of mine as well. And but I just didn't have the right lyrics for it, and it was like it went through about 3 or 4 different names and 3 or 4 different lyrical scenarios. And eventually I thought of a really close friend of mine who's the keyboard player in my band, and he's a lawyer. And then another close friend of mine who also was a musician turned lawyer. And we all have this kind of like fascination. We love Japan, and we always think about like, you know, how would a Japanese businessman, a salary man, kind of the pressure they'd face, and, you know, a lawyer has that kind of pressure as well. And I just imagined my friend, what he would do when he was on his summer holiday. And I could imagine he'd listen to Steely Dan and, just like he'd be,
Yeah.
completely melt away. And then all the lyrics just happen like that. And then that spawned, I think that spawned Take a Trip. I think in that week I wrote, I finished off Negroni Lover, and I did Take a Trip, and then I did Waterfall as well. And then it went from being a 7-track album to a 10-track album. So it was just in the nick of time. So it was very quick in the end, but it was quite a long, drawn-out process, and probably at the beginning very unfocused.
As the music progressed and your popularity's grown since the Don, the ironic humour of Donny Benét and the character of him seems to have changed a bit, becoming slightly less ironic and slightly more serious, markedly so in this recent album. Was that natural or much more of a deliberate progression?
A bit of both. I was really worried, and I've said this in other interviews, that I'd painted myself into a corner with the Don. So I think I was really, really happy how the Don came out, and it was really, I was very scared because for me the Don was like my perfect album. I was happy to retire on that, and I really was. I thought that would be my last album because I've been doing Donny for a while, and Australia's a small place.
But it was so popular and so good.
Well, it just took off. My first album was in 2011, and it was just a small underground Australian thing. And so all this was spawned from that 2018 kind of European thing. And with the Don, so it was that character of the cocky Casanova 35-year-old guy, and so I'm like, well, that I can't. And I had songs like Santorini, Night in Rome, Reach the Top, and they're all so you've got your songs about countries, and then you've got I Have Melody. It's not in the album, but it's there. And you have Love Online. Working Out's like an older Donny song. So all this territory that I couldn't go back and repeat myself on. So I can't, And the joke thing is fine, but probably on a personal level, I'm like, I don't know if I could keep on doing that. And there was there was some very heavy things happening at home in our family life. So it seemed really not inappropriate, but I couldn't find it in myself to write lyrically in that manner. And it was weird though, because you don't want to I don't want to drop everything and then all of a sudden become an Austrian folk singer or something. That's not going to. My audience isn't going to join me on that crossover. This album very much felt like a moment in time for me personally. So I still have with all the shit that had been going on, I still kept a sense of humor, and that still came through. But then there was also some things like One Night in Paradise. I was talking to a friend of mine who directed Love Online and Working Out, and I was chatting to her the other day, and her partner was listening to that song, and he's like, I really like that song. And I said, that's the song about trying to have sex again after you have a kid. And they both broke out laughing, and they're like, yeah, I know. So I was like, it's weird. I know that I'm not going to appeal to, it kind of still is, but my main audience is going to be 21-year-old kids. That's I'm nearly again back to the Brian Ferry, Robert Palmer thing. what the lyrical content they were writing about when they had hit that top as well. Like, it was very much a sophisticated romantic approach. So I kind of tipped the hat to that earlier. So I thought, well, I can still have a sophisticated approach, but again, with what's going on in, you know, friends and my audience's life, I guess.
When you find someone that makes you feel a strong connection to your heart right from the start, I should have known by now that instinct never lies. I can tell there's more to you than a pretty smile. The confidence you've got, I don't want it to stop. Appreciation of you I can't describe. I want to know, can we give love a shot? And I just want to say, you are the girl of my dreams. You make me complete. Falling in love again. Knock me off my feet. Going back to the start, when love came along, getting all weak at the knees, singing this song.
The tour that you were meant to be on now, you've rescheduled to November and October this year. Is that a bit hopeful?
Yeah.
Is that looking likely to go ahead?
We'll see. I don't know. It's the ground is shifting every day.
Yeah.
I mean, all I can say is the moment we're allowed to come, because our borders are locked shut, because the good and bad thing about Australia is that we're an island, and I think pretty soon we're going to find out how isolated we're going to be. I mean, yeah, the rest of the world is continuing on. I mean, you know, especially Central Europe, like, there's nothing they can do. You just have to deal with it. Whereas New Zealand is completely COVID-free now, which is amazing.
Yeah,
Australia, we were almost there, but again, like, how New Zealand now is figuring out, well, what do we do? Like, because, you know, we're stuck for a few years. So, but all I can say is, the moment we're allowed to come over and it's safe to do so, we are there. So, I mean, I've got my main audience is outside of Australia. So for me, COVID is really hurting my ability to make a living and an income through live performance. You know, Australia is like so small. You can do a national tour will take you 5 weeks to do, and then you're just playing on Friday and Saturday night. My main Australian tour for this album launch was 3 shows. So it was the East Coast. So whereas Europe, you know...
you're going everywhere in Europe. You're going through Belgium, Sweden. You're a massive...
Yeah,
where are you massive? You did that festival in... Was that Eastern Europe?
Everywhere. Oh, Bahoda, yeah.
Yeah, Bahoda.
Like yeah. That was like 15 or 18,000 people. It was insane.
Yeah.
And then,
what country was that? What country was Bahoda?
That's Slovakia.
Slovakia. You're huge in Slovakia.
And the Netherlands, we did Down a Rabbit Hole, and that was a massive crowd. And then we did it was fantastic, the Belgian one, Rock Werchter. So, and I mean, it's fun. Yeah, we had some UK shows booked in, which much smaller, but I mean, obviously London one's always good, but
you had
it's kind of cool. Like, and I mean, we had we had a show in Amsterdam that sold out in a week, and that's like, and that's it really hurts, and it's like, and you know, I'll get people like messaging me on Instagram saying, "Oh, when are you coming over?" I'm like, "Hey, like, we're endeavoring to come over in November. If that doesn't happen, we're over next year. Hopefully, we're allowed to come next year."
Yeah.
Again, it might be something where I have to quarantine to come back home to Australia, but I really want to go over and continue doing those live shows.
off the album and your wider catalogue, what songs would you say you're the most proud of, or the songs that you achieved what you wanted with the song?
In this album, off this album.
Off the album, and then maybe pick one from your wider catalogue. So both albums, or four albums, off all of them.
Right. Well, I think this album, "Girl of My Dreams," was. I think like whenever I write songs, if they write themselves really quickly, they're usually really good.
Yeah.
They're good ones. So like "Girl of My Dreams" wrote itself in 2 seconds. So that's probably one I think is a really classic timeless song. I'm pretty proud of all of them on this. Like, again, like I had such a strict writing process that I probably wrote 30 to 35 songs and only kept the 10 that were like singles.
Yeah.
And so then with the past album, like Konnichiwa, I think is just, again, another timeless song.
Yeah, I think that's everyone's first song of Donny Benét.
Yeah.
They get roped in by Konnichiwa and they stay for the rest. So
And then like, I think the Don, like Santorini is like the part, that's such a cool song. And,
Santorini's
but I think definitely Konnichiwa and Girl of My Dreams, I mean, I don't know, like I have a soft spot. Negroni Summer's great.
Yeah.
You Don't Need Love is really cool. I'm pretty cool. Like the first half of Mr. Experience, there's definitely, it's like it's a real album in that everything's really nicely balanced. And like the first half's like where all the action is.
Yeah.
And the second half is kind of like there's a bit of experimentation compared to the first. It's like you've gotten everyone in the first half of the album with the tempos and you know, like Mr. Experience moving up. You know.
Final question. You've become quite a sex symbol. Has it been tough being a sex symbol?
Yeah. I think it's just confidence. Like, as in, you know, I'm no oil painting, put it that way. But if you're comfortable in the skin you're in, that's sexy. And I think that's what a lot of people find sexy. So if that's being a sex symbol, and I encourage everyone, you know, be comfortable in the skin you're in.
Yeah. All you have to do is look at your YouTube videos and go down to the comments, and it's just men and women fawning with you.
I know. Yeah, I know. I did this show in I can't remember, it was either New York. No, maybe it was somewhere in America, and this guy kept on yelling at me, "Please sleep with my wife." And like at the end of the night, kind of brought her up, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Oh god!
I know. I was like, just go home and make love to your wife.
Yeah. What does Mrs. Benét think of all this?
Oh, she thinks it's really hilarious. So it's really funny. She's been there since since the beginning of it all. So it's like you know, it was really funny. I remember she'd be taking pictures of. Girls would be at early shows and, you know, be like, "Oh, Donny," and she'd be taking the picture just pissing herself laughing, knowing that they didn't know that you know, it was all over. So,
yeah. That was Donny Benét there. What a guy. I have so much time for that man. Hope you enjoyed the interview. I certainly did. It was such a pleasure to get to interview him. Donny's album Mr. Experience is out now in anywhere. You can get it on vinyl. If you can and you want to buy an album, please do, because like he said in the interview, musicians can't tour at the moment. They've got no real way of making money apart from vinyl sales and t-shirt sales and digital CD sales. So if you can, get yourself an album or a CD or a single or anything that supports your favourite music artists. We're coming to the end of the show now, so hope you enjoyed the extra half hour compared to last time. If you enjoyed the show, I'll be in the chat room, so let me know. If you didn't, again, you probably didn't make it this far, so it doesn't really matter. And I'll leave you with this classic from Carly Simon, It's Why. I nearly forgot, if you liked any of the songs on today's show, I've created a Spotify playlist with all the songs from today's show and one from the last show. All the songs are on there. Just search Luke Walwork on Spotify, and the playlist is called Isolation Days, and you'll find all the songs there. See you later.